Roy Cooper will be releasing his full budget. And of course, this is just a proposal. The General Assembly is the one that makes the decision on how exactly and what we spend. That's how it works, right? The legislative branch is the one that has the power of the purse. But he did release a little bit of his budget yesterday, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that with the Lieutenant Governor here in North Carolina, Dan Forest. Lieutenant Governor, as always, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for giving me the time, Tyler.
And as I said, it was a little bit of a surprise yesterday. Governor Cooper released a little bit of his budget, and I wasn't surprised. He wants to spend more money and wants to borrow more money, which is kind of the philosophy of the party he belongs to. What did surprise me, though, was the amount. I mean, he said he wanted to borrow $3.9 billion. I know one of the proposals for the Republicans right now, I think on the House side is 1.9. I think our treasurers chimed in and said $2 billion is about as much as we probably should borrow and still be okay with our debt and everything. But $4 billion seems like a lot.
Yeah, well, it is a lot. I think that the challenge, there's multiple challenges here, Tyler. I mean, obviously everybody kind of wants to know what it's going for, right? So everybody, as you know, in state government, especially in the kind of lobbying world of education, there's a million education lobbyists out there that come with their hand out, and everybody's got a sob story about what they need. But there's still only so much money in North Carolina, unless you raise taxes, of course, and we've spent the last 8 years trying to get our taxes in line so that we could have a robust economy like we do now, and then jobs get created and people get back to work and they get off unemployment and they get off food stamps, they get off welfare and they have a job and they're actually productive citizens again, and they have some hope in life. And that's what we've been working on doing. And so now you start to see this kind of creeping in of what are we going to do to pay for this stuff. So money's not free, as you know. Yeah. And that's part of, it's one thing to say, I want this much money. Then you have to say, how are we going to pay for it? Well, anybody can go out and borrow anything. I mean, people have credit cards, and they max out their credit cards and then can't pay for them. And that's really kind of what's being asked here. And so multiple conversations. What are you going to use this money for? I think the governor's saying he wants to use it mostly, I think $2 billion of it for K-12 schools, maybe more, and then some for community colleges and some for universities. There's no doubt there's needs out there, but I think you need to identify very specifically what those needs are, not just in a self-reported fashion. So basically the K-12 schools, the universities, community colleges self-report their need. I think we need a study of, the need and how we can pay for this over time. It shouldn't just be a 1 year, 2 year bond kind of thing. And here's another challenge is that historically in North Carolina, we have paid for capital expenditures at the local level. So K-12 schools are paid for by the counties, the community colleges, capital expenditures are paid for by the counties, et cetera. And if you're going to make this shift and say now the state's going to be responsible for paying this, what's to say that people don't start coming back and saying, well, you did this, we need to do this again. So it needs to be tiered for the poor counties. It needs to be tiered for the greatest need for the schools, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it needs to all fit in with how much debt burden can the state take on without losing our AAA bond rating, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack. There's no doubt about that. And you are correct. A lot of areas do need improvements. And if we have the money to be able to do it, great. But far too often in government, we hear the stories about how, asking for money is just sort of par for the course, because if you don't ask for the money, you won't get it. And you're almost disincentivized to be efficient, because then your budget gets cut. You see it all the time in government. And so you don't want to reward people who just ask for the most amount of money and rewarding that type of behavior. Now, the one thing that he did mention that I thought was kind of interesting is that, teacher salaries, we saw the protests in Raleigh last summer and the arguments, teachers need to make more money. He said he's going to increase teacher pay over 2 years, 9% is what he's looking for. And what's funny is, of course, Senator Berger put out a press release yesterday pointing out that since 2014, average teacher salary in North Carolina has gone up 20%. And in fact, just last year, they got a 6.5% raise. So all Cooper's doing is just continuing what Republicans have been doing.
Yeah, but, he gets the talking points because the media has never published what Republicans have done. I mean, 20% is a great raise for anybody. I don't care what industry you're in. 20% is a great raise, but even the teachers don't know this, that they've gotten 20% increases on average across the board. And so the question, you and I have had this discussion, but the question is always how much is enough? And random numbers for no reason is not a very good policy. So people talk about the national average. There's no such thing as a national average. We've talked about that. There's no body that collects all the data for every county, state, municipality out there, how they track not just salary, but incentives along with those salaries. So your health care and your retirement and all those nobody tracks that.
Yeah.
So there's no way to really figure that out. Then you add in cost of living. If you add in cost of living in North Carolina, we're right at the mid-range right now.
Yeah.
We're right at the 25 or so, in the middle of the states. So we're not doing as bad as everybody thinks. Can you do better? Of course you can do better. But, just last year we were leading the Southeast. Now that number changes because all the states around you start to go, we want to be the leader in the Southeast. And so you're always playing that game. But, how about a plan to say, where are we trying to go? What and how you get and use some real numbers, right? Don't use a national average. Now, national average is absolutely meaningless until you throw in all the factors. And so, I don't know why in America we can't have a real discussion about what this number should be.
I agree. I mean, you're right about the retirement, the benefits, the health care plan, not to mention, the time off, all of these things create a number that we have not seen. All we see is the raw data, which is, useless because a teacher in San Francisco is going to have to make more than a teacher in, Whiteville. And so this idea that they should be making the same amount is either going to make the person in San Francisco really, really poor and not be able to live there, or the person in Whiteville is going to be living large. And so it's finding that balance.